All right, so this is my presentation on Robert De Niro. So Robert De Niro was born in Manhattan in August of 1943. His parents met at an art school, and their marriage didn't last very long. They divorced when Robert was 2, after his father came out as gay. And during this period of divorce, when everything was being finalized, he lived with his grandparents. And they had him baptized into the Catholic Church secretly. So his parents didn't know about it until it already happened. He was raised primarily by his mom in Little Italy and Greenwich Village. His dad did live nearby, but he was the child in his mom's house. She had primary custody. And while he lived in Little Italy, he gained a lot of street friends. His father didn't appreciate this a whole lot. He wanted more for his son than to have little thugs as friends, but he was a kid. What can you do? During this time in his life and just childhood in general, he earned the nickname Bobby Milk. Now, if you've seen pictures or movies with Robert De Niro, you automatically know that he's very pale, especially for an Italian. He is very white complexion. So for him to be called Bobby Milk, it's more at a dig of why he isn't tan or olive skinned like most Italians we think of. He wasn't a bad student per se. He was just really shy and reserved. So he never enjoyed school a lot until he got to about upper elementary, when they started bringing theater into it. And during his elementary years, he was in the school production of The Wizard of Oz. He played the Cowardly Lion. He enjoyed it quite a lot and found that performing helped to ease his shyness and how reserved he was around others. But it was a little bit frowned upon by his family. They thought that he could do something better, be something better, and more than an actor. Something like an accountant or a doctor, something that actually makes money. And so he was accepted into the High School of Music and Arts right around his freshman year. But he left that school to attend just kind of a standard public school and dropped out of high school altogether at the age of 16 to pursue acting as a career. And during that time, he studied at HB Studio in New York and also the Strasberg Actors Studio to develop his feel for the best actor. And we're going to jump forward quite a bit. We're going to skip the 60s and go right into the late 70s, because in 1976 he married actress Diane Abbott and adopted her daughter Drenna shortly thereafter. And Drenna does do quite a bit of work within film. She is a director. She has put out some movies, and they also had a son, Raphael. He acted also as well. And now he is a New York real estate agent. He does real estate. Anyway, so De Niro and Abbott divorced in 1988 after a 12-year marriage. After that, Robert had a nearly 10-year-long relationship with model Tulky Smith. Now, they weren't married at all. This was more like boyfriend-girlfriend situation. They had twin boys, Aaron and Julian, in 1995 via surrogacy. And then they split in 1996. And Robert then married Grace Hightower in 1997. Their son, Elliot, was born in 1998, and he is autistic. Between 1999 and 2004, there was a 5-year separation in which they did file for divorce, but it was never finalized. So they ended up renewing their vows in 2004, and they had a daughter in December 2011 via surrogacy as well. And they live a very lavish life. So in 2014, they bought an apartment, a 6,000 square feet apartment. It had 5 bedrooms at Central Park West, which is a condominium tower that has like 35 floors. And it's very expensive. Like, there wasn't even a number when I looked it up. However, they did announce the finalization of their divorce in 2018 after 20 years of marriage. So now we get into De Niro's films. And the first one, The Wedding Party, was one of the first movies that he ever starred in. And it was filmed in 1963, but it wasn't released until 1969, the same year as Sam's Song was released. So it was just kind of sitting on a desk for 6 years, waiting to see the sunshine. And Greetings, released in 1968, was simply a satire movie on how to avoid the Vietnam draft. Like, you don't want to get drafted into a war that you don't believe should be fought. This is how you do it. And in 1971, he starred in The Gang That Can't Shoot Straight. And this has an interesting backstory. So, in like 1970 or 1971, The Godfather was released. And De Niro had initially auditioned for the role of Vito Corleone in the first Godfather movie, but decided to withdraw his audition so that he could star in The Gang That Can't Shoot Straight. The director of The Godfather remembered De Niro's audition and offered him the role of young Vito Corleone in The Godfather Part 2, which was released in 1974. And for this role, De Niro learned to speak multiple dialects of the Sicilian language. So like 3 to 4 different dialects, so that he could deliver his lines. And while there are a few in English, primarily in The Godfather Part 2, it is different dialects of Sicilian. Now, in 1973, Bang the Drum Slowly was a movie based on Major League Baseball player Bruce Pearson, who had Hodgkin's disease. And this is the movie where De Niro really became a name. Magazines and film reviewers were saying that it was a touching performance, that this guy was going to make it. He had an excellent acting voice and screen persona, and just a really good feel about him. Directors liked him, his co-stars liked him, and he just came into the spotlight with this film. And Mean Streets, also released in '73, is another gangster movie. I mean, he grew up in Little Italy. He had young thugs as friends. It's not surprising he stars in gangster movies. Now, Taxi Driver from 1976, De Niro decided to spend quite a bit of time at U.S. Army bases in the Midwest to learn dialects and mannerisms and to get a real feel for this character that he was portraying, to make Travis just come alive. And as I hope you all know, that oh so famous line, "You talking to me?" was improvised because it's De Niro and he just wanted to, and he felt that it worked. Now, The Last Tycoon, also released in 1976. De Niro had to lose 42 pounds to play and to represent his starring role well, and to do it to the best of his abilities. And in Skorowski's musical New York, New York from 1977, Robert worked with musician George Auld to learn to play the saxophone. So all the scenes that have De Niro playing the sax, that's actually him. He learned to play the saxophone. Now, Raging Bull. This one is a little bit of a hard movie. It's hard to watch because it's so violent and it's raw and it's real. Raging Bull was based on the memoir that Jake LaMotta put out, entitled Raging Bull, My Story. And when Skorowski got a hold of it and he read it, he wanted to make a movie out of it, to bring this boxer's life to the big screen and make it accessible to all people, so to say. But for De Niro to play LaMotta in Raging Bull, he had to gain 60 pounds to reach the weight of midweight boxing capabilities. He had to learn to box and also had to figure out how to be aggressive. As you recall me saying, De Niro was a shy kid. He was very reserved. And so for him to play an aggressive role without a lot of comedy was an interesting deal for him. He had to learn to do it. After he read LaMotta's memoir, he told Skorowski that it's not great literature, but it's got a lot of heart. Reviewers that watched this and magazine editors said that it was a very different Robert De Niro, that it was terrifying because this wasn't who they had come to associate with De Niro. And so he did put a lot of time and effort into this. It was, as he said, the hardest role that he had to learn to play. And so between 1980 and 2020, there have been a lot of movies, a lot of critically acclaimed movies. And so this last slide is just a couple that stood out to me. I haven't watched them all, but I did look into them a little. And Men of Honor, as you can tell just by the title screen, is a military movie. Heat and The Irishman, Heat from 1995 and The Irishman from 2019, are both more on the gangster side of things. Goodfellas is also a gangster movie. And one of the more recent movies that De Niro has put out is called The War with Grandpa from 2020. And it's more of a lighthearted comedy role. So that is Robert De Niro in a nutshell.